Number 1. In 2015, the body of 18-year-old Joshua Maddox was discovered in the chimney of a cabin only 2 blocks away from his father's house in Woodland Park, Colorado. The poor boy had been missing since 2008. He told his dad he was going for a walk, but never returned home. By all accounts, he was an intelligent and funny young man. Officially, his death was ruled as an accident. Joshua had just been trying to get inside the cabin through the chimney, and somehow became stuck in the shaft. Unable to dislodge himself, he slowly perished inside his makeshift tomb. According to the cabin's owner, the place had been abandoned for the past 10 years. Every now and again, the owner would come back to check on the place, and said that he did notice a rancid smell. He assumed it was coming from some dead rats, but figured that they couldn't be inside the chimney because there was a large piece of furniture in front of the fireplace, impossible for any rats to get through. Josh's body was only discovered while the cabin was being demolished. His corpse was in the fetal position. Strangely, the only clothing that Josh was wearing when he was found was a ribbed thermal shirt. He was completely naked from the waist down. No shoes, no underwear, no pants, nothing. If Josh had decided to sneak into the cabin that night by climbing down the chimney, are we supposed to believe he did so while only wearing a shirt? This doesn't seem very likely at all. The owner of the cabin himself stated that he had metal bars installed at the top of the chimney to stop animals from crawling down it. If these bars could keep small creatures from being able to get inside the chimney, they would have made it effectively impossible for Joshua to do so from the outside. It seems pretty obvious that he was already inside the cabin when he crawled into the tight fireplace and became trapped. But as we know, the entrance was blocked by the heavy furniture that trapped Josh inside. You see the problem here, right? Something doesn't quite add up. The missing piece of the puzzle may just be a man called Andrew Richard Newman, a guy who knew Josh and who may well have been with him the night he went missing. One person who knew Andy, and who also suspects that he had something to do with Josh's death, decided to leave a post about the case and his opinions on the whole thing. This was his post in its entirety. I went to high school with this skinny, dorky hippie named Andy who played guitar in a band. I was never good friends with him or anything, but a year or so after I graduated, one of my good friends, Josh, started hanging out with him and then went missing. Last I heard, Andy was telling another friend, "Yeah, me and Josh have been spending a lot of time together. We're planning a trip to New Mexico." Didn't really think anything of it until somebody showed me these articles. Turns out that in addition to becoming a lot scarier looking, Andy had indeed headed down to New Mexico, where he found himself shooting the shit with the caretaker of a disabled guy and got invited over to their apartment. The caretaker gets in the shower, and when he comes back out, the disabled guy is stabbed to death, and Andy's gone. When Andy got arrested, he also claimed to have killed a woman in Taos and stuffed her body in a barrel. The cops had indeed found a woman stuffed in a barrel in Taos, but already had somebody in custody for it, and decided to stick with that guy instead. Years later, I found out that the caretaker had died in a bar fight, and without him, the cops didn't have much in the way of evidence somehow, so that case against Andy was dropped too. Several of us went to the cops, saying something to the effect of, "Yo, Josh who went missing was last seen with Andy, who's a murderer. Maybe you should check that out?" Despite a fair amount of pestering, nothing really ever came of it. And by nothing, I mean the police mostly didn't even return our calls, and once accidentally cancelled the bulletin on Josh, saying that he was alive and well and living in the next town over. He wasn't. He was actually in the chimney of an abandoned cabin 2 blocks from his parents' house. The coroner said that the body had been there for about 7 years, and ruled the death accidental, concluding that Josh had probably climbed down the chimney in an attempt to break into the house and got stuck. Given the age of the corpse, that doesn't seem overtly ridiculous, Except for the fact that in addition to Josh having last been seen with Andy immediately before his stabbing spree, people called in to report having heard rumors that Andy was bragging about having, quote-unquote, put Josh in a hole. And the fact that the owner of the cabin says it would have been impossible to access the chimney from above because he'd installed a heavy steel grate under the top layer of bricks to keep out raccoons and whatnot. Or the fact that somebody had ripped heavy bars off the wall in the kitchen and propped it against the fireplace. Or the fact that Josh's stuff was already inside the cabin. Or the fact that when he was found, Josh's knees were above his head, which means to me like he would have had to go in head first. Or maybe the fact that Josh was barefoot and naked from the waist down. This is just my opinion, but I don't care who you are. You don't try and climb headfirst into a chimney via a hole in a metal grate with your dick hanging out. But the most ridiculous part of all of this for me is this quote from the coroner. He said, "I know it's not a natural death, and I'm confident it's not a suicide. My other options are an accidental death, homicide, and undetermined cause of death. It's frustrating we can't pin it down." So, your options are accidental, homicide, and undetermined, but you just can't seem to pin it down. You're telling me it's almost as though you are unable to determine the cause of death? Well, in that case, everybody knows that accidental is the way to go. Look, I get that they didn't find enough evidence to arrest Andy or anyone else, but these motherfuckers went ahead and demolished the cabin despite all of this. Josh's body was cremated. As far as I can tell, nobody even bothered to call Andy to ask if he knew anything. By the way, from what I hear, Andy's still out and about doing his thing when he's not in the mental hospital. It's not that I want somebody to blame. I'm not trying to throw a tantrum because gimme answers. All I'm saying is this. I wish they would have done some police shit. Open an investigation. Try to track down some leads. Interview some folks who've been calling in tips for the last 7 years. Maybe check for semen or something. I don't know. Don't just say accidental, dust off your hands, and call it a day. Anywho, sorry for the rant, guys. Had a little whiskey. Felt like I had to vent. But yeah, that shit frustrates me. So, there you have it. Either Joshua's death was the result of a terrible accident, or foul play was involved, with the only possible culprit being Andy Richard Newman, a man with a slew of prior convictions, ranging from assaulting a police officer to grand theft and battery. Since all of the evidence around the case has already been destroyed, it seems highly unlikely that the police will start looking into this case again. Number 2. This one's a little different in nature from the other entries. For the past 13 years, a woman in South Korea has been holding a 24/7 live stream in her apartment. Yeah, the live stream's literally been going for 13 years straight. In all those years, she's hardly ever left her apartment. Since nobody knows who she is, frequent viewers have nicknamed her Chip-chan. Usually the Chan honorific is used for Japanese people, but in this case, it's because she was first discovered by 4chan users. The first person to stumble across her stream actually thought she was dead, as she was laying in an extremely unnatural position just in the corner of the camera. In fact, if you decide to check out the stream yourself by following the link in the description, you'll most likely find her passed out in the corner of the screen as well, looking completely dead to the world. She apparently sleeps for about 20 hours every day. When she is awake, she'll sometimes just start screaming. But why is she known as Chip? Well, the woman herself claims that she's being held captive by a man known only as P. According to her, P is a dirty cop that wants control of a massive amount of money she inherited. She believes that P has implanted a device known as a Verichip in her ankle, hence Chip-chan, and claims that it keeps her subservient and controls her sleep patterns, making her doze off for hours on end. Since there's no audio on the livestream, she communicates all of this to her viewers through a series of handwritten notes which she sticks to the camera. These change frequently, some of them telling us about her situation, and some just a garbled, confused mess. Obviously they're in Korean, but past examples have included things like, "Stop deceiving me, internet," and "Don't get tricked, don't get fooled. Early every morning. If someone comes that paralyzes the person, I can't be stopped." She hasn't said whether the cameras were installed by P himself as a way of keeping an eye on her, or whether she set them up around the house herself, hoping that other people might tune in and see what's happening to her. Whatever the case, when P comes by the house, the feed goes dark. This could last anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours. Most think that this man is bringing her supplies. Here are a few of the more sinister messages that she's left about her situation. "The stalker uses his skill from 2006. I have slept for 20 hours every day since then. I do not know what have happened while I sleep. I have always been afraid of sleeping. Stalker P breaks in after disabling the camera. Korean cop P makes me lose my consciousness at any time, so I always sleep on the chair for years. How can you sleep sitting on the chair every day if you don't lose your consciousness? I haven't dreamed for years cause I lose my consciousness." On top of all of this, strange things occasionally happen when Chip-chan sleeps. In this recorded footage, for instance, you can see her in bed in the right-hand side of the camera, while someone else off-screen turns her apartment lights on and off repeatedly. Now, you might be thinking that this is starting to sound like something off the Sci-Fi Channel, and some people think that the more likely explanation for Chip-chan's behavior is that she's schizophrenic and also suffers from narcolepsy. The problem with that is that she doesn't display any of the normal signs of either of those conditions. For instance, it seems unlikely that someone with schizophrenia would film themselves 24/7 due to paranoia. Also, narcoleptics fall asleep sporadically for short amounts of time, not for 20 hours straight every day. Though her own story seems rather implausible, it doesn't seem like these theories explain what's behind Chip-chan's behavior either. To this day, Chip-chan is still streaming live, and still communicating with anyone who happens to be watching. Some fear for her mental health, while others fear for her safety. Even though the reason behind all of this could easily be more tragic than creepy, it seems unlikely that we'll ever know for sure. Chip-chan actually has her own dedicated subreddit, where people post their theories and observations. I've left a link to it down below, along with a link to the livestream like I said before. If you do tune in, you'll likely see her unconscious in the corner of the screen, with a handwritten note covering much of the rest of it. Keep us updated if you see anything unusual. I'm sure we'd all be interested. Number 3. Doncaster, England, 2007. Andrew Gosden, a 14-year-old mathematical genius, left his home early on a Friday morning to catch a bus to school. The young man was a gifted student, had a 100% school attendance record, and was the kind of kid who would leave a note for his mum if he was just going around the corner of his street. Those closest to him believed he was living a happy and normal life, with no problems weighing on his mind either at home or at school. And yet, despite all of this, Andrew decided not to catch his bus that day. Instead, he walked to a nearby park and waited until 8:30 a.m. for his parents to leave for work. Knowing that his house was now empty, he walked back and changed out of his school uniform, threw on some jeans and a Slipknot t-shirt, put his uniform in the washing machine, and then walked out the door. He then withdrew £200 from his bank account and caught a train to London. The only thing he brought with him was his PSP, but not its charger. He didn't bring any spare clothes or anything like that, suggesting that he didn't plan on staying in the city for a prolonged period of time. But Andrew didn't return home that evening, or the next evening, or any evening after that. To this day, 10 years later, he's still missing. A campaign to find him has been going on ever since, and in London, you can still occasionally find a missing person poster with his face on it. So, what could have happened to him? Well, let's go over the facts. We know for certain that he did make it to London. 3 frames of CCTV footage surfaced a month after he disappeared, which showed him at King's Cross Station that day. The trail goes cold after that, since the footage on all nearby cameras had already been deleted. We also know that when Andrew purchased his train ticket to London, the seller informed him that a return ticket would only cost 50 pence more. Despite that, Andrew still only bought a one-way ticket. Even though some of his previous actions indicate that he planned to return home that day, this one implies that he was certain he wasn't going to. I mean, even if he was on the fence about going home that day, surely for 50p he would have just bought a return ticket. Just in case. Could he have planned to meet someone there then? Maybe he thought he had a ride home with them. Well, Andrew didn't own a phone, and he didn't have an email address either. Searches of his home, library, and school computers turned up nothing to suggest that he planned on meeting anyone. The Thames River was thoroughly searched, in case Andrew had decided to commit suicide by jumping into it. The search turned up nothing. On top of that, the band Muse was playing in London that night. They were one of Andrew's favourite bands. His father went to the concert to search for his son, but again, found no trace of him. Mysteriously, we also know that an unknown man turned up at Leominster police station, saying that he had information about Andrew's disappearance. He used the intercom, and an officer was summoned to speak with him. However, by the time the officer arrived to take details, the man was gone. One of Andrew's favourite television shows was The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, in which the main character fakes his own death to start his life anew. Hoping this to be the case, his parents put money into his empty bank account, just in case he needed more. Chillingly, this money was never touched. Nobody's sure what motivated Andrew to miss school that fateful day. Why did he travel to London? Why did he clear out his bank account? And why did he do something so out of character? Who was the man at the police station claiming to know about Andrew? Is the boy alive or dead? Perhaps one day we'll have answers to all of these questions. Until then, if you happen to have any information about Andrew's disappearance, please call the Missing Children hotline on 116-000. Number 4. Most of you probably know who Mark Ruffalo is. He's a great actor and has been in his fair share of decent films. I particularly enjoyed Zodiac and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. What you might not have heard about is his brother's untimely death. Scott Ruffalo was found shot in the head in his Beverly Hills condo on December 1st, 2008. To start with, it was reported that he died playing a game of Russian roulette. For those who don't know, that's where you take a revolver and load it with a single bullet. Players then take it in turns to shoot the gun at their own head, hoping that the chamber is empty. Eventually, somebody paints the walls red. So, why on earth would he take part in such a suicidal game? Well, most likely he was high out of his mind. The other people at the condo with Scott were Shahar Michelle Adam and her boyfriend, Brian Schofield, both of them known drug users. Interestingly, Shahar was a descendant of the Saudi royal family, leading the papers to call her the Saudi princess. According to her, the couple only dropped by to Scott's place to pick up some keys. That's when he mentioned something about Russian roulette. While searching for the keys, she claims to have heard a gunshot. When the couple then found Scott bleeding from his head on the couch, they quickly left. That was her version of events anyway. A little over a week after Scott's death, however, the police determined that his death was a homicide. He hadn't shot himself in the head at all. The angle of the bullet made this an impossibility. Both Shahar and her boyfriend Brian became persons of interest. Despite this, neither of them were charged. The case went cold. Then, 4 years after Scott's death, Shahar, the Saudi princess, turns up dead at the age of 29. The cause of death was a suspected overdose. Since she was one of the only key witnesses, the investigation into the case pretty much died along with her. So, did the group really pull a deer hunter? Did they take it in turns, aiming the gun at each other rather than at themselves? Or was there something more malicious going on in Brian's mind, and when Shahar became a problem later down the road, he dealt with her? Who knows? Scott's death is still considered an unsolved homicide by the police. Whatever happened, his famous brother, Mark, has been able to come to terms with his loss. "You never get over it, you just get used to it," he said. "You get calloused, a little bit harder maybe, but take these tragic things and turn them into something meaningful and worthy of the loss. Make it count." Number 5. When a real-life medical case has been the basis for an episode of The X-Files, you know that something freaky's gone down. In 1994, Gloria Ramirez was rushed to Riverside General Hospital in California. She was in a state of total confusion and was suffering from the effects of advanced cervical cancer, namely tachycardia and Cheney-Stokes respiration. She needed to be sedated. The medical team injected her with diazepam, midazolam, and lorazepam, but she started reacting extremely poorly to the treatment. Something wasn't right. An unusual, oily sheen started appearing all over her body, and a fruity, garlic-like odor was coming off of her. The staff tried to defibrillate her heart, and one nurse drew some blood from her arm. The blood in the syringe smelled like ammonia, and small, white particles were floating in it. That's when the nurse that drew the blood fainted. She was swiftly removed from the room, and everyone assumed she passed out from shock. Not long after, a medical student who was examining the syringe of blood began to feel extremely nauseated. She couldn't continue, and was forced to leave the trauma room as well. Not long afterwards, she also fainted. A respiratory therapist helping to stabilize the woman passed out next. One by one, the medical team started falling like flies. All of the emergency room patients had to be evacuated from the building due to the supposedly toxic blood that had been drawn from Ramirez. Her skeleton crew was left behind to try and save her life, but it was no use. After 45 minutes, she was pronounced dead. In total, 23 people became ill after breathing in the fumes from her blood, and 5 were hospitalized themselves. As a result of all of this, the late Gloria Ramirez was dubbed the Toxic Lady. So, why did the medical team react so badly to her blood? An early investigation concluded that all of the fainting was due to mass hysteria. That was refuted by the people who were affected, however. The medical resident that had passed out developed hepatitis and a vascular necrosis in her knees after coming into contact with the blood, so this whole thing couldn't have been psychological. After analyzing her body, some experts postulated that Mrs. Ramirez used DMSO, a degreasing solvent, on her skin. A sort of home remedy, if you will. That could explain the sheen that developed on her skin, as well as the unusual smell. The shocks from the defibrillator could have converted the solvent into a poisonous gas. Her family, however, said that this was nonsense, and that Gloria hadn't been using the substance on her skin. When her body was released, they tried to have their own pathologist examine her, but Gloria's organs had been cross-contaminated, and her body was too badly decomposed to draw any conclusions. The DMSO theory has emerged as the agreed-upon explanation for the toxic lady case, though top medical professionals admit that even this theory has notable holes in it. It's simply the best explanation they could come up with, or at least the most scientific. Ultimately, with Gloria now buried, the exact cause of her toxicity may never be fully understood. So there you have it, 5 unresolved mysteries that I hope tickled your fancy. If you enjoyed the video, then please show your support by liking, subscribing, whatnot, and I'll be back again very soon with some more spooky stories to lull you to sleep. Until then guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark. You'd be forgiven for thinking this photo was nothing more than an example of bad driving. Just a picture of a car reversed into a boarded-up old house. Indeed, there's nothing overtly creepy about it. When you hear the backstory to this image, however, I think you'll change your mind. In 2004, Brianna Maitland, a 17-year-old from Montgomery, Vermont, went missing. She hasn't been seen or heard from since. This was her car, a pale green, 4-door 1985 Oldsmobile sedan. It was found like this in the middle of the night, with its headlights on full blast, partially inside the old Dutchburn house, an abandoned barn. There was no trace of Brianna anywhere. Her driver's license was still in the vehicle, along with 2 uncashed paychecks on the front seat. She had also left behind all her clothes, her ATM card, her migraine medicine, makeup and contact lenses. Some of her belongings were strewn on the ground in front of the vehicle, suggesting that she had either left in a hurry or had been forcefully removed from the car. This picture was taken about 1 mile away from where she worked, the Black Lantern Inn. She had a shift that fateful night. According to her co-workers, she got into her car around 11:20 p.m. and drove off into the night. Nobody else left with her. The trooper who came across Brianna's car assumed an intoxicated driver had crashed their vehicle and abandoned it. Since nobody lived in the house in the picture, it wasn't treated as a big deal. Brianna lived by herself, so nobody even realized she was missing for several days. Her mother didn't learn about her abandoned car until 5 days after her disappearance. When she was finally clued in, she filed a missing persons report immediately. Needless to say, after a short investigation, the police started to suspect foul play. They believed that Brianna was likely taken by more than one individual. Whether she was ambushed while still in her vehicle, or whether the whole scene in this picture was staged by the perpetrators to make it look like an accident, remains unknown. Many people have also linked Brianna's disappearance to another case, that of Maura Murray, a college student who vanished 90 miles away only 1 month prior. Okay, let's thicken the plot a little. On the day of her disappearance, Brianna had been out shopping with her mother, Kelly. While the pair were in a store, something caught Brianna's eye outside. She told Kelly that she'd be right back. Brianna didn't return to the store. Instead, her mother met her outside in the parking lot. According to Kelly, Brianna was clearly shaken, unnerved and agitated. She told her mum that she needed to go home and prepare for her shift at the Black Lantern. That was the last time Brianna's mother saw her daughter. To this day, she has no idea what happened outside that store that distressed her daughter so much. In the weeks following Brianna's vanishing, the police received an anonymous tip-off. They were told that Brianna was being held against her will in a rented house only 10 miles outside of Montgomery. The house was raided. It was occupied by 2 crack dealers, and there were plenty of narcotics strewn around the building. What there wasn't, however, was any trace of Brianna. When the cops interviewed her close friends, they confessed that Brianna had recently experimented with illicit substances, so it's possible the tip was legit. The police also received an anonymous letter saying that Brianna had been dismembered and fed to pigs. These claims have never been corroborated. Brianna's parents received numerous phone calls from an unknown person. The person would sometimes tell them that their daughter was tied to a tree in the woods. Other times they'd tell them that she'd been left at the bottom of a lake. As of right now, nobody knows what happened to Brianna. All we have is this unsettling photo, though we still don't know if she had crashed the car in some frantic effort to escape, or if this whole scene had just been constructed by her captors. In 2006, a woman closely resembling Brianna was caught on CCTV at a casino poker table in New Jersey. All efforts to track down this woman have failed. "11 months ago, Reddit user Maverick made a post on our unexplained photos. His friend had recently purchased a camera with a motion detector that was linked to his phone. When the pair went off to the pub one evening, Maverick's friend left his camera on charge in his bedroom. While they were out, his phone sent him a notification that motion had been detected back at his house. It then sent him this image. Some people have speculated that it could be a homeless person. Others have suggested it was likely an intruder hoping to hurt somebody. Strangely though, Maverick stated that his friend lives in the middle of nowhere and has an Alsatian that would have attacked an intruder. Nothing was taken from the house, and the camera didn't pick up any further movement. This has led a few people to think that the figure is some sort of paranormal entity. Then again, if a person simply walked into the room and then left quickly, the device wouldn't have tracked his movements further anyway. Not to mention, when looking at this enhanced image, the figure definitely appears physical. Regardless, the house was searched, and no intruders were found lurking in the nooks and crannies. Maverick's friend is just lucky he wasn't sleeping in bed when this unknown person wandered into his room. The question remains, however, what did this mysterious figure want? This is the last photo taken of Madison Jameson, who disappeared in 2009 along with her mother, Sherilyn, and her father, Bobby. The family had driven 30 miles from their home in Eufaula to Red Oak, Oklahoma. They were searching for a property to buy and were reported missing a few days later. After 3 days of searching for them, authorities came across their abandoned truck. It looked as if the Jamesons had left in a hurry. Inside the locked pickup were their car keys, GPS, and $32,000 in cash. The family dog, Maisie, was still inside the car as well, severely malnourished, but still alive. Also inside the vehicle were Bobby's and Sherilyn's cell phones. This picture of Madison was discovered on her father's phone. There was a huge mountain search effort to find the missing family, but there was no trace of them anywhere. Then, 4 years later, in 2013, a local hunter made a horrific discovery. He came across the skeletal remains of 3 people, laying side by side. It was the Jameson family. Their skeletons weren't intact and were in very bad condition. They were found a mere 3 miles from their abandoned truck. Due to the state of their remains, an autopsy was impossible. Their official COD is listed as unknown. So, what happened to them? There are a surprising number of theories. Their family remains convinced that the 3 of them were murdered. Sherilyn's mother, Connie, even claims that the family was slain by a religious cult. According to her, Sherilyn had been on the cult's hit list for a long time. Bobby's cranium was found with an unexplained hole in it, which gives some credence to her theory. They also believe that this photo of Madison was taken by whoever took their lives. Some people think Madison's expression in the image is one of fear, of discomfort, but others think that she's just in the middle of saying something. As such, it's hard to know exactly what was happening at the moment this image was snapped. Madison's parents had been acting strangely in the months leading up to their disappearance. Both Bobby and Sherilyn had become extremely thin and emaciated. On the day before they disappeared, they were caught on CCTV loading up their car in a trance-like state, shuffling around like zombies. They had also become intensely paranoid. Sherilyn had told her friends that she'd been experiencing ghostly visions and hauntings, and Bobby had confessed to a priest that he had been reading a satanic Bible and that he wanted some special bullets to do battle with evil spirits. When they took all of this into consideration, the authorities first put this down to the two becoming hooked on meth, a substance that's often made in the rural area the family disappeared in. However, no trace of any illegal substance was found in their home. Some people have put the Jamesons' weird behavior down to the fact that they were experimenting with witchcraft. In a way, that kind of links us back to the possibility of cult involvement. On top of all these theories, both of Madison's parents suffered with depression. A long, hateful letter from Sherilyn to Bobby was even found in their abandoned truck, though, according to Sherilyn's mother, this was common practice. What wasn't found in the truck was Sherilyn's handgun. Is it possible that she had had enough of life and decided to take her family with her? Was Bobby in on the whole thing too? If that's the case, why would they have bothered to take their dog with them? Why would they have taken enough money for a deposit on a property? Was the money even intended for a plot of land in the first place? And, if they were actually slain, why would the perpetrator place Bobby's phone back inside the pickup and not take the $32K on the front seat? The exact cause of the Jameson family's untimely fate remains a mystery, but this photograph at least gives us a glimpse into Madison's final moments, and makes the case all the more real and harrowing. You may have seen this one before, but I think it's creepy enough to warrant a place in this video. In 2014, a foreman took a camera aboard an old frigate that was dry docked. The ship was being dismantled, and he was tasked with taking pictures of the work areas. He took hundreds of photos and sent them all to his boss. Looking through all the images, the boss came across one in particular that caught his attention. He sent the image back to the foreman with a question. Who's the guy with the axe at the edge of the camera flash? This was the image. When you enhance it, it becomes all the more clear and disturbing. The foreman hadn't seen anybody else on board the frigate. It was supposed to be empty. The picture was taken deep in the ship, and it was extremely dark. He was walking around with a torch to guide his way. When he took a photo, he'd turn off the torch, briefly leaving him in total darkness. Then, after he'd snapped his image with the flash on, he'd turn the torch back on and continue through the ship. This man had been lurking in the blackness the entire time. Nobody who worked at the dock recognized the man in the picture. Since it was a military vessel, the boat was thoroughly searched. Nobody was found on board, and the security camera that was pointing at the ship's only exit didn't record anybody leaving either. To this day, nobody has any idea who the axe-wielding man in the image is, or what he was doing on the ship in the first place. Whatever the case, whenever I see this picture, it always gives me the chills. Here's one for all you codebreakers out there. On the subreddit r/crimes, a picture was posted with a bizarre title. A seemingly random series of letters and characters. This was the accompanying picture. A little eerie to look at, sure, but without any context, nobody really knew what to make of it. That's where user Callio came in. Since the last 7 characters were just letters, he used a Caesarean shift of +13 to reveal a cryptic message. That's where A equals N, B equals O, and C equals P, etc. By ignoring the other characters and just decoding the letters, this message was revealed. John Baptiste Herman, metadata, correct. So what was this message supposed to mean, and how did it relate to the picture? John Baptiste Herman was the name of a man who, in 1969, was slain in Buffalo Narrows. His killer was Frederick Moses McCallum. The user who originally posted the image and the cryptic clue also happened to have a photo of McCallum as his profile picture. As to the meaning of the metadata correct part, that's anyone's guess. Perhaps it means there's more information hidden in the image. The OP also made a second post, this time with a string of seemingly random letters and numbers. This was found to translate into, "Letters are key." Since then, there have been no other posts. So, what is this all supposed to mean? Is it a confession? A riddle? Just an ARG? How does the photo fit into it all? Hopefully it's less sinister than the image and messages imply. This is one of the only known pictures of the Leatherman, a traveling vagabond. Despite his story becoming quite infamous in Connecticut and New York, the Leatherman's true identity remains unknown. He was given his nickname for the simple fact that no matter the weather or the season, he always wore a handmade leather suit. From 1856 to 1889, he traveled a continuous circuit between western Connecticut and the Hudson River, a 365-mile route that took him 35 days to walk. Everybody along the trail knew the Leatherman, and he traveled the route with such accuracy that he'd always arrive at the same places within a few hours of when he was expected to. Whenever he came across a new scrap of leather on his trail, he would sew it into his ever-expanding suit. He hardly ever talked to anybody, communicating mostly in gestures and grunts. On the rare occasion he did talk, he spoke in broken English, and if asked about his background, he would abruptly end the conversation. Regardless, people fed him. When they offered him shelter, he'd always refuse. He lived in a series of caves along the trail that you can still explore to this day. One such cave consists of an 8-foot vertical chute that you have to climb down, and a small tunnel that goes 10 to 15 feet back. Even during the harsh winters in that part of the USA, he stuck to his routine and continued to sleep in his caves. Nobody knows why he lived the way he did, though medical professionals at the time said he was suffering from an emotional affliction. You can take that how you want. Regardless, he was judged to be of sound mind and was living a nomadic lifestyle by choice. He eventually passed away and was found with a French prayer book on his person. Most people agree that he was probably either French or French-Canadian. Still, despite extensive research, nobody at the time, or even to this day for that matter, could work out his true identity. The brass plaque over his final resting place simply reads, "The Leatherman." Tales and theories abound to this day. I admit this mystery isn't exactly creepy like all the others, but I'd never heard of this guy before, and I wanted to share his story. It's interesting to hear about local celebrities from times gone by, especially ones with unknown origins. Apparently, Leatherman tools are even named after this guy, so he clearly had an impact on people back in the day. Let me know what you think about this mystery and all the others down in the comments below. Perhaps we can come up with a few answers. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. I tried to find some pictures that haven't been covered all that much in the past, I know that these kind of videos are done to death, so most of the images have already been seen 1,000 times, but I hadn't come across most of these before, so hopefully you hadn't either. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters: Crazy Mask Parade, Scion of the Emperor, Procupidine Natter, Marley Wright, Fun with Failure, Ray Price Burton, Matthew J. Bauer, John Crouch, Lester Lido, James Laber, Anime Wimp, Gina Valera, Maricruz Cardano, Alex Greensall, Sarah Ramirez, Philip Westra, Monica Mendoza, Crawford K. McDonald, Kat Mayers, and Charles Wilson. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate your support. Remember to share the video around if you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe, and all that jazz, and I'll be back again very, very soon. Until then, guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark. Number 1. For the past 10 years, severed human feet in running shoes have mysteriously been washing up on the shores of British Columbia, Canada. Since 2007, 16 feet have washed ashore, most of which remain unidentified. Of those 16, only 2 have been left feet, both of which were matched with their right counterpart. The rest have all been from separate people. So, where on earth are they all coming from? Why did they only start appearing after 2007, and why have no other body parts surfaced? As stated in a Toronto Star article back in 2008, speculation ranged from natural disasters, such as the tsunami of 2004, to the work of drug dealers, serial killers, and human traffickers. On top of those theories, some people thought that local medical students were playing a sick practical joke with parts of cadavers, or that the feet could be from the passengers of a plane that crashed into the sea. The fact that a human foot can float as far as 1,000 miles made this an extremely tough nut for investigators to crack. This is what the man who discovered the 5th foot had to say. "There's someone doing this all right. Think about it. If they tied a chain around someone's ankle and threw them overboard, the foot would just pop off. That could explain it. Maybe they've got a lot of bodies stored up in a container and they got washed out. We don't know. There's a lot of stuff that goes on over here." In reality, the truth is actually far less sinister, though still very tragic. According to forensic investigators, most of the feet probably belong to people who killed themselves by jumping off the Paciolo Bridge in New Westminster and into the murky water below. The rest most likely belong to people who drowned accidentally. The ocean is full of scavengers, and it doesn't take them long to reduce a dead human body to near nothingness. That is, the parts they can get to. Submergence decay takes care of the rest. However, since these people died wearing running shoes and socks, their feet were in a protective shell. Once their ankles disintegrated, the shoes floated to the surface, and currents took care of the rest. That explains why no feet in sandals or stilettos have been washing up on British Columbian shorelines. Of all of the feet that have appeared to date, 2 have been linked to people who had mental illnesses, and 3 to people who seem to have died of natural causes. According to experts, there's no reason to believe anything nefarious has been going on. But why did they only start appearing after 2007? Well, they didn't. That's just when this whole phenomenon started receiving widespread publicity, and the local residents subconsciously started being on the lookout for washed-up body parts. So, there we have it. The answer to this mystery is far more mundane than the sensational theories that still get bound around to this day. That being said, It's possible that not all of these feet belong to suicide jumpers or people who died accidentally. After all, thousands of people die at sea every year under various circumstances. Though foul play isn't suspected in any of the cases, it hasn't entirely been ruled out either. All the locals can do is wait and see if any more feet float their way. It seems almost inevitable that they will. Number 2. Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos was a 21-year-old Cuban-American woman living in Florida back in 1931. She was considered strikingly beautiful and well known in the Key West area for her exotic good looks. Though her family was blessed aesthetically, their luck ran out when it came to staying in good health. Back in those days, tuberculosis was typically fatal, and it ended up killing almost all of Elena's immediate family. The young beauty herself was unable to escape its clutches, and when she fell sick with the disease, she was quickly rushed to the local hospital. She was treated by a German-born doctor, an eccentric man by the name of Karl Tanzler. He possessed an excellent medical mind and did everything in his power to save Elena's life. During this time, Tanzler became quite enamored with his patient and showered her with jewelry and clothing. At one point, he even confessed his love for her. It's unclear whether she felt the same way as he did, but that's besides the point. Despite his best efforts, Tanzler was unable to save Elena's life, and on October 25th, 1931, she passed away. When it came time for Elena to be buried, Tanzler paid for the entire funeral, and even had an above-ground mausoleum constructed for her. No expense was spared. Her family was of course thrilled by this. They couldn't afford to pay for such a grand monument themselves. The good doctor had become very close with their relative during Elena's treatment, so if he wanted to pay his respects in this manner, so be it. You can imagine her family's surprise and disgust when they went to visit Elena's grave one day, only to find it completely empty. Her body had been stolen. But why would someone have gone through the trouble of digging her up, and where had they taken her? Those were the questions on the detectives' minds at the time. For the next 7 years, the whereabouts of her corpse and the identity of the body thief would remain a mystery. Turns out, the culprit was a lot closer to home than anyone at the time had expected. Her own doctor. When Elena was first brought in for treatment, Dr. Tanzler was mesmerized by her beauty. On top of that, there was something extremely familiar about her face. As a child, Tanzler claimed to have had a set of visions in which he was visited by one of his dead ancestors, Countess Anna Constantia von Kossel. During these visions, the spirit of his ancestor revealed the face of his one true love, the woman he was destined to marry. When Tanzler first set eyes on Elena, he instantly recognized her as the dark-haired woman who had been revealed to him by the dead countess. Unfortunately for him, he was unable to save the life of his future bride. But Tanzler wasn't about to let something as trivial as death get in the way of his love life. Every night, he would visit Elena's tomb to be with her. This carried on for 2 years. As time passed though, visiting her grave no longer sated his obsession. Despite his love interest being long dead, he wanted their relationship to become more physical. One April night, under cover of darkness, he crept inside the mausoleum and removed Elena's body. He then placed it in a toy wagon and wheeled her back to his home. Needless to say, after spending 2 years dead in a cold tomb, Elena's body had seen better days. Although she was obviously a little worse for wear, Tanzler still thought she was beautiful, though to bring some life back to her, some minor adjustments needed to be made. Tanzler scooped out what was left of Elena's dead eyes and replaced them with glass ones. He then used wire and coat hangers to hold her bones together, bringing a rigidness back to her form. Of course, her skin had started to decompose as well, so he encased the corpse in wax and plaster. As her scalp began to rot away, he fashioned a wig from the hair that fell out of it. As time continued to go by, maintaining Elena's body became more and more tricky. But with each new difficulty, Tansler came up with a solution. As her inside shriveled away, he filled the body's abdomen and chest cavity with rags. He dressed her in expensive clothes and jewelry, and sprayed her with numerous perfumes, disinfectants, and preserving agents to get rid of the foul stench of death and to delay the decomposition process. As the years racked up, Tansler continued to work on his dead bride, doing his best to keep her as lifelike as possible. By the time he had finished, she was more synthetic than organic. Tansler had turned Elena into an uncanny replica of herself, a lifeless human doll. This entire time, he kept Elena's body in his bed and slept with it every night. Despite now being nothing more than a shoddy Madame Tussauds waxwork, Tansler's love for Elena never faded, even after the police discovered it was him who had stolen her body. Although he was swiftly arrested and charged, his case was eventually dropped. The statute of limitations for the crime had expired. Tansler was allowed to walk free. Surprisingly, his reputation wasn't too poorly affected either. Most people at the time viewed the Doctor as an obsessed, yet well-meaning romantic. According to some sources, Tansler used a death mask he had made of Elena's face to create a life-sized effigy of her, very similar to the corpse he had been keeping in his bed for the last 7 years. Some have even suggested that this wasn't a mere recreation, and that Tansler was somehow able to switch Elena's body with another, and had her secretly returned to him. Whatever the case, Tansler died a free man at the age of 75. His doll bride watching over him as he passed away. One account of his death even states that he died in the arms of the lifeless Elena doll. Number 3. Minneapolis, 1981. A 911 operator receives a call from an obviously distressed man. He's breathing heavily into the phone and struggling to hold back tears. Through whimpers and a barely coherent voice, the man confessed something truly shocking.
Finally, I just stabbed somebody with a knife stick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing somebody.
Whoever was on the other end of the line, they weren't lying. Upon investigation, the police found the body of Kimberly Compton, an 18-year-old student. She had been viciously stabbed 61 times with an ice pick. This was the first of 3 murders carried out by a man dubbed the Weepy-Voiced Killer. For 2 years, he would plague the city, attacking and murdering women, and then notifying police about what he had just done. 2 days after Compton's death, the killer called again, this time to make an apology.
Just listen. I'm sorry what I did to Compton. I couldn't help it. Don't know why I had to stab her. I am so upset about it. I keep getting drunk every night. I can't believe it. It's like a big dream. I can't think of being locked up. If I get locked up, I'll kill myself. I'd rather kill myself than get locked up. I'll try not to kill anybody else.
Another day passed, and the weepy-voiced killer called yet again, this time to say that the newspaper accounts of the killing were inaccurate. Though he claimed to be sorry for Kimberly's murder, it started to seem as if he was getting a kick out of his newfound notoriety. Detectives knew that if that was the case, it was highly likely he would kill again. They weren't wrong. His second victim was Kathleen Greening, a 33-year-old. He drowned her in her own bathtub. Finally, Barbara Simmons, a 40-year-old he had met at a bar. She was stabbed more than 100 times. So many wounds would usually suggest that the killer truly hated the person they were stabbing. But in this instance, it seemed as though the weepy-voiced killer either enjoyed the thrill of murder or just couldn't help himself. The calls he made are quite chilling to listen to, and it's likely that his reign of terror would have continued had it not been for the actions of a 21-year-old prostitute called Denise Williams. The elusive, weepy-voiced killer had planned for her to be his fourth victim. On this particular night, he solicited Denise and brought her back to his apartment to have sex with her. Afterwards, he offered to drive her back. She accepted. On the way back, though, Denise sensed that something was wrong. Rather than driving her directly back to her stop, her client was taking her down a dark suburban area. That's when he pulled into a dead-end road and stopped the car. Noticing an empty bottle on the floor, Denise quickly picked it up to use as a weapon. A decision that probably saved more than just her life. The man pulled out a screwdriver and stabbed her several times in the stomach. She smashed the bottle over his head, causing the man to bleed profusely and allowing her enough time to make her escape. Not long afterwards, a 911 operator received a call. The dispatcher immediately recognized the voice on the other end of the line. There was no mistaking it. This was the weepy-voiced killer. This time, however, he wasn't calling to make a confession. He was calling for an ambulance. The damage that Denise had inflicted on him was too severe to ignore. Officers were notified, and within minutes, the weepy-voiced killer was in custody. This was him. Paul Michael Stefani, a janitor with a history of mental illness. A man who said that to him, murder was as much a part of normal life as driving or eating. He was convicted of murder and attempted murder, and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Despite this, Stefani wouldn't confess to the murders for almost 20 years. He died of skin cancer in 1998. Number 4. Harrington, Delaware, 1991. A man called Charles Holden calls the police and asks for an officer to be sent to his house immediately. He claimed that he had just picked up a hitchhiker. While driving the guy to where he needed to go, the stranger suddenly pulled out a screwdriver and began attacking Charles, demanding that he give him all his money in his truck. Charles said that he managed to escape and ran to a nearby store for help. The hitchhiker jumped out of the truck and chased him, but Charles managed to get back inside his vehicle. The hitchhiker sprinted after the truck, but eventually gave up. Charles said that he drove around for a while to clear his head, before heading back to the home he shared with his mother, Dorothy Donovan. When he finally got there, he saw that the same hitchhiker that had just attacked him was skulking around outside his property. An officer was immediately dispatched. By the time he arrived, the supposed hitchhiker had fled the scene, but just to be safe, he escorted Charles inside. That's when they noticed the broken back door window. They rushed upstairs and found the body of Charles's mother, Dorothy, in her bedroom. She had been stabbed to death. Nothing had been stolen, and there was a bloody handprint on the banister. The prime suspect was, of course, Charles. His story was rather implausible after all. It sounded as if he had just made the whole thing up on the spot. I mean, what were the odds that the same hitchhiker that had just tried to rob him would randomly end up at his house, break in, and then murder his mother for no good reason without taking a single thing with him? Well, this case demonstrates that Lady Luck does like to show off her twisted sense of humor from time to time. DNA extracted from the bloody palm print proved that Charles wasn't responsible for his mother's death. What's more, 4 eyewitnesses were found that confirm the hitchhiker did exist. The case appeared on the popular TV show Unsolved Mysteries in 1995. It wouldn't be until 2006, a full 15 years after the incident, that the hitchhiker was found. Gilbert E. Cannon. His DNA matched with that found at the scene. He confessed to killing Dorothy and said that he was on drugs at the time. He wanted to find a place to stay for the night, and by pure chance, the first house he came across without any lights on belonged to Charles and his mother. When he saw Dorothy inside, he stabbed her to death with his screwdriver in a drugged-up haze. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Had Gilbert not accidentally cut his hand while breaking into the house, an innocent man could have easily been sent down in his place. The victim's own son, no less. It makes you wonder how many other unbelievable alibis might actually be true. Number 5. August 28th, 2003, 2:28 p.m. Brian Wells, a 46-year-old pizza delivery driver from Pennsylvania, walked into a bank clutching a walking cane. He approached the teller and handed them a note. The instructions written on it were simple. Gather all of the employees with the access codes to the vault and fill a bag with $250,000. Brian gave them 15 minutes to do as he asked. This wasn't your average bank heist, however. Brian seemingly had no gun with him, no backup, and the cane in his hand was unlikely to get him very far. What he did have was a device strapped around his neck, concealed beneath his shirt. When he lowered his collar, he revealed a large, box-like contraption. It was a bomb. At least, that's what he told them. The thing was likely a fake, but the bank employees weren't about to argue with him. Since there was no way to get into the vault at that hour, the teller only managed to gather about $9,000. Brian took the bag of cash, along with a lollipop from the counter, hopped in his car, and sped off. It wasn't long before state troopers caught up with him in a local McDonald's parking lot. He was quickly surrounded and cuffed. That's when Brian was able to tell his side of the story. He claimed that the bomb around his neck was real. Said that he was delivering pizzas to an address on the outskirts of town when he was attacked by a group of men. They held him at gunpoint, locked the explosive to him, and forced him to rob the bank. At this point, the police didn't know what to believe. The bomb squad was quickly notified, and the cops kept their weapons trained on the pizza boy. Everybody at the scene anxiously awaited the arrival of the bomb squad, Brian in particular. Every passing second brought the deadly device closer to detonation. Nobody knew whether he had hours or minutes. "Why isn't anybody trying to get this thing off me?" he screamed to the nearby officers. Then, at 3:18 p.m., the device started beeping. All the onlookers could do was keep their distance as the beeps became quicker. Brian desperately tried to shuffle back too, as if trying to put some distance between himself and the bomb chained to his neck. Then, bang. A small explosion threw Brian backwards onto the pavement. Blood poured out of the fist-sized hole it had made in him. Surrounded by news cameras, the 46-year-old took a few last gasps of air. Exactly 50 minutes after entering the bank, Brian Wells was dead. 3 minutes later, the bomb squad arrived. So, was Brian telling the truth about what happened to him? And if so, who was responsible for chaining the device to the poor guy? Well, the subsequent investigation revealed a number of interesting things. Firstly, whoever had made the bomb was a talented craftsman. In fact, the contraption was described as a marvel of DIY design. The bomb worked much like a giant handcuff, and it would have been impossible for Brian to remove it himself. It was loaded with 4 small pipe bombs and was filled to the brim with decoy wires and fake warning stickers to throw off anyone trying to deactivate it. On top of that, it turns out that Brian did have a gun with him. The cane he was holding was actually a homemade shotgun disguised as a walking stick. Inside Brian's car, detectives found a series of notes addressed to the bomb hostage. They contained a very specific set of instructions for Brian to follow, and stated that if he wanted to survive, he'd have to follow each one to the letter. He was to rob the bank and retrieve the $250,000. The notes then instructed him to go to other locations around town, where he would find a set of 4 keys needed to remove the device around his neck, along with a code to release the combination lock. The note ended with, "Act now, think later, or you will die." After robbing the bank, the first note instructed him to go to the nearby McDonald's parking lot, where he would find another note with further orders. Obviously, this is where Brian was apprehended, so the cops followed the note's directions themselves, in hopes that it would lead them to the culprits. This scavenger hunt continued until one note led them to a jar in the woods, which was meant to contain the next set of instructions. By the time they arrived, the note had been removed. Whoever had set this whole operation up had been watching the police from the very beginning. The remote location where Brian was jumped offered no clues either. The criminals, who the media dubbed the collar bombers, had successfully covered their tracks. For the next 7 years, the FBI was stumped by this ridiculously intricate bank robbery. Who on earth would come up with such a complicated and convoluted plan that could so easily go wrong? That did so easily go wrong. They were either imbeciles or geniuses. In actuality, they were a mix of both. The case took numerous twists and turns, and after years of investigation, it came to light that Brian Wells, the man who had a chunk of his neck blown away, was actually in on the plan from the very beginning. Now, I know what you're thinking. What sort of madman would agree to have a live bomb strapped around his neck and then go on a life-or-death treasure hunt? Well, the answer to that is not Brian Wells. Let me explain. Brian had racked up a lot of debt with a group of crack dealers. He wasn't a user himself, but had started a relationship with a prostitute who was. In return for crack, she would have sex with the mild-mannered pizza boy. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out that crack dealers are the last people on earth you want to owe money to. He was desperate and needed an out. That's when he was approached by Kenneth Barnes, Bill Rothstein, and Bill's ex-girlfriend, Marjorie Deal Armstrong. The group had a plan to rob a bank, which involved someone wearing a fake bomb around their neck. Not to speak ill of the dead, but Brian wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. In exchange for a cut of the loot, he agreed to wear a fake device around his neck and carry out the heist. If he was caught at any point, the notes planted in his car would be proof that he was forced to commit the robbery. In Brian's eyes, it was the perfect crime. Just before the heist went down though, Brian was double-crossed by his accomplices. They pinned him down and locked the real explosive collar around his neck. He went from playing the part of a hostage to becoming an actual one. Not only that, but he was doomed from the very beginning. The collar had been designed in such a way that any attempt to remove it or deactivate it would result in its detonation. That was because the money was never the ultimate goal, not for the man believed to be the mastermind behind the plot, Bill Rothstein, a handyman with the skills needed to make both the bomb collar and the gun. Rothstein was a man who never achieved much in life. If stealing money was his main motivation though, there would have been far more pragmatic ways of going about things. No, he wanted to make headlines, to lead the police on a wild goose chase and captivate the world with one of the most intriguing cases in history. He intentionally recruited co-conspirators that he could easily control and manipulate. Brian was desperate. Kenneth was a drug addict. Marjorie was said to be highly intelligent, yet had gone mad over the years. It wasn't hard for Rothstein to trick the crew into doing his bidding. At least, that's the main theory anyway. Rothstein died in 2004, before his involvement in the case ever came to light. He took all of his secrets to the grave, and left many questions about the case unanswered. What we do know is that he and the others were involved, and that Brian wasn't an innocent victim, but a victim nonetheless. In the end, Rothstein left both Kenneth and Marjorie to take the fall. As a side note, Marjorie actually died in prison just a week ago, on the 4th of April, 2017. There are plenty more details about this case, which in the interest of time I won't cover here. There's a bunch of documentaries and articles on it if you want to learn more, as well as a lot of news footage. In 2011, there was actually a Hollywood movie released called 30 Minutes or Less, which was almost certainly based on this case. They turned it into a comedy. A little disrespectful, but nobody saw it, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Hi guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Well, I know most of you probably enjoy story videos a lot more than these, but I think from time to time it's a lot more fun for me, personally, to mix things up a little and do a few of these list videos. Not too many, mind you, I always like to focus on the stories. And speaking of which, I'm gonna have some more coming for you very soon, because I held that poll on Twitter and you guys have voted for some creepy cult stories, I believe. Anyway guys, if you did enjoy this video, then be sure to smash that like button or I'll smash you. And feel free to come and join me over on Twitter and Facebook, Snapchat, all my other things, blah blah blah, you get the drift. Until the next one guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.